Hi everyone. So my name's Alex, and I'll be talking about building Ember Addons with Ember CLI. So here we go. So I work at a company called Addon, which makes software for investment management. So we care a lot about, we have kind of a huge app with lots of visualizations, lots of data. And so back in 2012, we picked Ember to work with to make that. And one funny thing about using Ember since 2012 is that there's been a lot of upgrades since then. And so we've been using Ember actually, I think, before 1.0. And so we've had a lot of kind of keeping up to date. And so part of my talk is going to focus on not just using the new cool stuff, but also how do you transition to it from an app that used to use something else. And so with that in mind, there's kind of going to be two parts to this talk. The first one's an intro to Ember Addons and Ember CLI. And then the second part, I'll talk about converting a library that was written using a different format into the new add-on format. So let's go ahead and start with part one, just intro to Ember Addons. So before I get too far, I think it's worth saying that an Ember add-on could be a lot of different things. So I think Ember Data is available as an add-on. There's a bunch of testing tools, QUnit, build tools if you want your CoffeeScript or less to compile. All of that can be available as Ember add-ons. So an add-on is just kind of anything that you can drop into your app. It's easy to install, and it's kind of got a defined format. It still works, good. But with that in mind, I'm going to be talking about libraries being used as add-ons. So components, things that you can just drop in and use, like a select component or a date picker. So I'll just kind of focus on that specific area. And so let's start by talking about components and why they're useful. So obviously, there's lots to be gained by using the same code in multiple places. So it helps you enforce being modular. Picking out a part of your app and saying this can be used throughout the app. It can be used in different apps. And that helps too, because that way you can share with the rest of the Ember community. They can contribute code, and that helps everybody out. So kind of isolating parts of your app into specific behaviors that you can turn into components is great. And just to kind of go over that in more detail as it relates to Addon, here's a little bit of illustration for Addon. So this is one of our main pages that you might go into if you're going to do some analysis. So in the middle here, there's like a table that has some detailed information. You don't have to worry too much about what this is, but just to say there's a table with detailed information. There's charts that give you a better overview of what you're looking at. In this case, it's financial data. And on the left, there's a context chooser that lets you pick kind of what context everything is in. And so we can look at that and say, OK, here are two table components. What they have in common is they have a huge number of items. In this case, maybe 10,000 items, and we want to make sure we can display that well. And it turns out that the same code we write for the table can also be used for the context chooser. So that's great. And so we isolated this into its own component, and we even were able to open source it. So now it exists as a library called Ember Table, and that handles large amounts of data. And it's great to have that isolated so other people can contribute to it. And there's other places in our app we can look at too. So for example, there's the charts on the right. Those should be their own components, so we have a charts library as well. And then if we go back to around the app, there's just a bunch of little things that could be isolated into components. And so there's things like date pickers and select components, drop-downs, settings, and search. And not all of these are made into an open source library component, but it's good to just kind of be aware that all these things should be put into their own pieces of code. And so there's another library we have called Ember Widgets. Anyway, so this is how it should look if you want to start out using a component. You should go to your app and you should say, hey, I need that nice table thing that the other company had. Let me just install it using Bower. So Bower is a great package manager for dependencies you need. So I'll type Bower install save Ember table, and that'll be great. But in fact, it doesn't actually often work like that. Usually what happens is you install using Bower, and it doesn't work, and you're not really sure why. You look in the console. It's not found in the console. I wonder why. Oh, I forgot to include it in whatever build process I had. So OK, let's go include that. Oh, let's fix the include order because I put it before Ember by mistake. Oh, it still doesn't look quite right. Oh, I know what I'm missing. The CSS wasn't included because there's a separate CSS process. Now it looks like it's showing up, but the functionality is broken. So let's go through this list of dependencies and include all of those, some of them which probably aren't documented, in my build process, following the same steps for JS and CSS. Ah, great, excellent. This is good, easy to use. So there's problems with kind of the ad hoc way of doing things, which is the problem that add-ons try to solve. And there's other problems too. So global namespacing is a problem. One thing that we've been doing for a long time is we define this table component as ember.table.ember component. And that's great unless anybody else has something that they want to define as ember.table, in which case you're going to have problems. So Ember CLI, which I'll get to in a minute, helps a lot with that. Dependencies, kind of what I alluded to, if Ember table needs some things, those all should kind of come with Ember table and not just be included in documentation. Compiling from things like CoffeeScript, less Sass, and then discovery, just to find out, hey, I need an add-on, how can I find one? And so with that, let's talk a little bit about Ember CLI. So CLI stands for Command Line Interface, and it's kind of the future of Ember. In the 2.0, I think we'll be moving to actually using Ember CLI. For the moment, it's kind of a separate library tool, but it helps you a lot to develop Ember applications. And so things you can do with CLI are things like Ember new, and then your app name, and then that'll generate a whole scaffolding for you. Ember server to install and watch your files, or sorry, not install, but serve your files so you can view them in the browser. Ember install to bring in a lot of things such as add-ons. And so maybe I'll just kind of try to show you quickly what this looks like. So I have trouble with my mic, just a minute. So we can run Ember new, and it generates a bunch of stuff, which is great. So it generates something like this. There's a directory structure with an app folder and a bunch of other folders like tests, which is really nice. App is populated with a bunch of great stuff like components and controllers. So it's pretty easy to just run this, and now you have a place to put all your code. It'll already serve it up, so the app is kind of all ready to go and running. We can make add-ons this way. So Ember can also generate those. They come with a little bit of a different structure, so it's helpful to have a tool that just does it via a single command. And that one looks a little bit more like this. There's an add-on folder and an app folder, and everything else ready to go. So I think I'll get into what those actually mean in just a sec. So here's the app file structure generated by Ember CLI. And so some things that you see here, there's an app folder, which is all of your main application code. That's actually pretty much all I want to talk about for apps, but for add-ons, it's a little bit different. So there's two folders called app and add-on. And one thing to take note of is app is not the same as it was in the app folder, in the application. So now app and add-on are both places that you can put library code for your apps. And the only difference is if you put code in the add-on folder, it'll all be part of the add-on namespace. If you put code in the app folder, then when somebody installs your library, all of that code will be merged with the application namespace, which basically means that the user won't have to do include statements to get at your code, whereas if you put it in the add-on folder, they will have to include from your component library specifically. So those are both places that you put library code. The blueprints folder is a place that you put code that will help your add-on install. So when somebody wants to use your library, they're going to want to install it, and that should be like a single command. And then your add-on should do a bunch of work to set up everything it needs to do. And so you can put code that does that in blueprints. It has a tests folder, which helpfully comes with a place to put your dummy application. So there's a tests dummy app directory that also comes when you run that command. And that's a great place to put your demo application. So in our old structure, we made an app folder to do that. Now it goes within the tests folder, which makes a little bit more sense because that's kind of related to testing out your app and making sure it works. So let's go through the problems we had before and just kind of see how Ember add-ons address them. So first problem was global namespacing. Before we defined everything globally so that the host app could access it, now we define it in one of these two folders, app and add-on. And depending on where we put it, it'll either be in its own add-on namespace or part of the host app's namespace. So the namespacing problem is a lot better this way. So add-on side, we do something like export the component, and then on the app side that's using our library, we can just import from the component/components. This is great, so that's namespacing check. Dependencies, let's say we're in our add-on, we can specify in bower.json what dependencies we have. Here's some library. And in index.js, which is kind of the entry point for your add-on, we have this included hook that says, hey, host app, I also need some library to be installed. And the reason we have to do this is that Ember add-ons are installed by NPM, and they're not really aware of Bower. And so to tell your host app that it needs to have something installed via Bower so it's available, you have this hook that lets it work. So dependencies are good. Compilation. The old way we had to do this, or a couple ways to do this, was to have a dist folder where you put generated files, like generated JavaScript and CSS. The new way, the host app can kind of take care of it on its own. So it can build itself, it can minify, and if you want lesser Sass, you just kind of have to include a dependency that says, hey, I built in lesser Sass, and then the host app can take care of compiling that all down for you. So compilation is a lot better. And then discovery, in our package.json of the library app, we just have to include a keyword, Ember Addon, and then that'll be indexed and available via the site emberaddons.com. So it's much easier to search and find, hey, what add-ons will I have that are compatible with my new Ember app? So this takes care of pretty much all of our concerns. So we've arrived in the promised land. Hooray. And we can install via just one line, Ember install add-on, which is a new command that does npm install and generate. So this is great. Let me move on, I guess, to part two, which is what if I have a library already and I want to convert it to be an Ember add-on to get all of these great benefits? And so I think one thing that we should learn is Ember's done a great job of upgrading all of what they've been doing. So Ember 2.0, request for comments, had a lot of details about what you should do to upgrade, how we're being careful about upgrading. And since we've been using Ember since before 1.0, this is a really big deal because the fact that they've done so well means that we've been able to keep using newer versions of Ember. And surprisingly, the Ember core team have done this without taking multiple injections of $100 million, which is pretty impressive. During their upgrades, Embers have valued reliability, consistency, so that's really nice too. And basically having a nice upgrade path so that from 1.0 we can get to 2.0 without having to try it, see what breaks, and then fix it as it breaks. So what lessons can we learn from this? Have a transition plan, I think, is the first one. Just having one at all. Avoiding rewrites so that people don't have to relearn how to use your app or library. And deprecating things before you remove them for a couple of versions. So that's all really useful. I think the only one we're not going to follow for our library is deprecate then remove because we're not at 1.0, but it's still a useful thing to learn. So let's go, so I'm going to get a little bit more in depth about this particular library that we're going to try to migrate over to Ember Addons. So this is Ember Table. It's pretty high contrast here, but you can still see. So the idea of Ember Table is that it's a table. It's a pretty heavy-duty table. It can handle a huge number of items, like 100,000, and it only renders the ones that are on the screen. So that's nice, and then it has a bunch of column features. Anyway, it's a table. It has a lot of features. So we're going to try to migrate this. So the current way that we did this is we said, okay, this is kind of an app, and we want to make a demo app, so we'll make an app folder where all of the demo application code will go. Library code itself will go in the source folder, and then we'll have a compilation process that results in JS and CSS files being put in the dist folder. And so this has a lot of the same challenges that we saw earlier. So for example, there's global namespacing that we did. There's a huge install process. And then we had to go through all this trouble of compiling distribution files, which is a big hassle. To give you a bit of an idea how difficult it is to install add-ons like this currently, or libraries currently, this is kind of what we recommended that people would do as a simple way to get going with the library. So one line here is including Ember Table. 3 lines are including Ember itself. One line is Ember Table CSS, and then the other 5 are all dependencies of Ember Table, which you kind of had to know that you had to put in as well, and also in the correct order. So this is just kind of a lot to figure out, even if we tell you in the documentation to do it. So that's kind of the old version and what we had to do. So let's look at a transition plan, first lesson we learned. So we broke this down into 3 steps. Phase one, we're going to try to basically get Ember table working as an add-on while not doing any work ourselves, or as little work as possible. So we're going to try to import everything as a Bower dependency and just expose it as an add-on using the new add-on structure. In phase two, we're going to migrate the demo application, and then only in phase three, we're going to migrate the actual library to the new structure. So phase one, the basic idea, let's set up a new add-on, Ember Addon, will generate everything for us. And the first thing we're going to go do is in that add-on, the new add-on we made, we're going to go to bower.json and say, we have a dependency on Ember table. And so what we've done is we've kept the old Ember table around. It's still, you can still install it via Bower like you used to be able to. And here we've just told our add-on that we need Ember table. So we'll do that. Okay. Next thing we do is we go and make a blueprint. So blueprints are what your add-on will use once it's installed into a host app. So here we use an after install hook and add Bower package to project. And so what this is telling the host app is, as soon as you install this Ember table add-on, run this code, and it will install Ember table, the Bower package, into your host app's Bower folder. And so this is great because now our add-on can depend on the old Ember table being there. So the next thing we can do is, within our add-on, we can make use of all of these Bower dependencies that we had using the included hook. So here we're working with index.js, which is the add-on entry point. And we use the included hook to say, make sure you import all of these dependencies that I now know are there because I installed them during my blueprint. So in this case, we need anti-scroll, jQuery UI, and the actual Ember table code itself. So the add-on kind of does all the work of bringing everything in. And now we do one final trick, which is we import everything from the globals and export it in the right place. So the add-on structure has a structure like add-on / components / ember table.js. And so if you try to use the add-on, you can do an import Ember table from there. And it knows, because of the file name in the directory, that that's how the add-on structure is defined. And it expects your code to be there, but instead of actually putting code there, we just imported the global code, which we had available via our old Ember table, and then exported it. So we haven't actually written any new code, but we have reorganized it into the new add-on format. So after phase one, we've gotten pretty far. You can install it as an add-on, and then you can work with it and pretend it's an add-on. And you're almost there, but we haven't really done anything too impressive because the globals are still polluting the namespace. They still exist. You brought in the old Ember table as Bower, and nothing has actually been ported. So that brings us to phase two. Let's start porting something over. One idea is, before we actually port the library code, maybe we'll want to port over the demo app and the tests and see if it works. So in our old setup, there wasn't really a way to make a demo app, so we made a folder called app. But in the new setup, there is a demo app available in the tests dummy folder. So we migrate everything from the left side app folder to the right side. And then we migrate the tests as well from the old tests folder to the new tests folder. And this is great because we've given ourselves a way to test the new version once we start migrating actual library code, because we have the demo app to look at and we have any tests to test against. And so we only have to report the remaining actual library code. And so that's in phase three. So we used to have this in the source folder. Now it goes in the add-on folder. It's better to put things in the add-on folder than the app folder because that makes sure that everything is in your add-on's namespace, which kind of helps it not be global. That way, somebody who's using your add-on can use explicit imports and then import things as different names or whatever else they want to do. So we move the source over to the add-on folder. Optionally, let's say that you actually do want it to kind of be global and usable. You can just do this little trick, which is in your add-ons app folder. Remember, app folder and add-on folder are both places you can put add-on library code. We can do kind of the same import and export trick. So we import the table component from the add-on folder, and then we export it. Now it's been exported in the app folder, so you can use it without importing in your host app. And then the final thing you might want to do is add a globals build for backwards compatibility. And so maybe this is a file that's outside of the Ember add-on, outside of what Ember Addons knows about, but it does a bunch of imports and then just sets all the globals back to what they were. So this is maybe one final step you could add. And then after this, done, published npm, and it should be possible to install via Ember install add-on. Great, so thanks, and thanks to my Addapart team. Mentioning our Addapart team, we're hiring, so let us know if you're interested in working on some of this stuff. And there's information for the slides. Thank you.